Okay, we're continuing with this book here, Holy Grail of Wisdom Quotes. We're now doing the author Goethe, the German author. First of all, I just have a picture here of Michael Sugrue, who is a great famous philosophy professor. He's probably the greatest philosophy professor I've ever seen. He has a decent lecture on the internet about Goethe, his first book, The Sorrows of Young Werther. Okay, now I'm going to show you Goethe. Goethe is like the greatest German writer who ever lived. And he sort of bridged the age between the Enlightenment and Romanticism. And he was a little bit more of a throwback to the Enlightenment. So he was an absolutely brilliant guy. He was a magnificent genius. He's the greatest genius of German literature. He's considered like what Shakespeare is English literature. That's what he's considered to German literature. But he's even more of a genius than that. He was a great scientist. He was a great statesman. He did, advanced work in optics, advanced work in biology. So he had a situation when he was a young man. He fell in love with a lady named Charlotte, and he was head over heels in love with her, and she rejected him, and he was heartbroken. He almost considered suicide, and he wrote a book about it called The Sorrows of Young Werther. He wrote the entire book in 4 weeks, and it became this giant best-selling masterpiece. And here, I'll show you some more pictures of what that's all about. So here is a picture of Charlotte. And so Charlotte was the young lady he was in love with, and Charlotte had a complex life. She was already sort of semi-engaged to another man who was away for about a year or so, and Werther would come to visit her, and he was just in love with everything about her. He loved the way she talked, the way she walked. He would write letters to his friend named Wilhelm. There was no cell phones in those days. So the book is really an epistolary novel of all his letters to his friend Wilhelm about how wonderful Charlotte is. Everything about her was just as wonderful as it could be. The way she dressed, the way she interacted with her siblings, how thoughtful she was, how funny she was. She was like Helen of Troy to him. Okay, and she kind of really liked Werther, but, she knew she was sort of semi-betrothed to this other guy named Albert who she was going to marry. And when it finally became inevitable that she was going to marry Albert and not him, Werther committed suicide. And it was such a popular book, it led to a wave of suicides in Germany, and the book was even banned and put on these forbidden lists because they're afraid people would get too emotional with it. And Werther was only about 25 years of age when he wrote it. But just to give you this sense of, the brilliant magnificence of him as a writer. And he kind of reminds me of much more modern writers from the 1800s, let's say Ralph Waldo Emerson, and from the modern era, more of Brian Tracy. Or Zig Ziglar or something. He's very encouraging. Which I like about him. He inspires a person to great achievement. I mean, he was a magnificent overachiever type of guy. Okay. Now I'm going to show you some of his other paintings here. This painting is of Faust. And Faust is a later book written by Goethe. And it's almost like a poem, almost a play. And part of it is the idea of a Faustian bargain, which is almost like to make a deal with the devil. Okay, and he was this professor who felt that he had learned all these things, all these degrees and stuff, but he really knew nothing. It was just a bunch of vocabulary. And he was not happy. And he sort of made a deal with the devil about being able to get whatever he wanted. Okay, and so this Sorrows of Young Werther is what Goethe wrote when he was a very young man, 25 years of age. Faust is a book that he worked on all the way up into his 80s, and it's considered one of the great masterpieces of Western literature. The only problem is it's very sort of like kind of stuck in the German language. I'll show you now another painting. This is an awesome painting here. This is Faust on Easter morning, and this is a great painting of hope. So Faust also went through a phase when he was severely unhappy, depressed, feeling that his life had been wasted, and he was contemplating suicide. He's about to drink the poison, and then he looks out the window by the churchyard, and he hears the church bells on Easter morning, and he sees the family so happy, and he remembered how happy when he was, as a young man, going to church with his family, and then he decides, life is still worth living, maybe something good can still happen, and he decides not to commit suicide, and it's sort of a magnificent, spectacular painting. And, okay, let's go through some of Goethe's quotes here. First of all, he lived from 1749 to 1832. Let me shrink myself a little here. Okay, he says, he who wishes to keep a secret must hide the fact that he possesses one. Good if you give a man a purpose worth living for, he can survive any situation. Now that, of course, sounds a little bit like Fyodor Dostoevsky and Viktor Frankl, and other people have come to that conclusion. If you've got a strong sense of purpose, you can endure a lot more. That's one of the benefits of being a Christian. You got that view of life. But also, it could come from you're trying to achieve something, or you want to help somebody in life. Like, if a parent is sick, because they want to take care of their kid. Like I've seen some mothers, because it was, essential to them to take care of their child. Even though they were very sick, they lived longer than expected. They could endure more than was expected. And, in the concentration camps, Fyodor Dostoevsky saw that in Russia. Viktor Frankl saw that in Germany. Okay, for a man to achieve all that is demanded of him, he must regard himself as greater than he is. Audacity is required for greatness. And I really like that one because I spent a long time studying how to become a genius because I wanted to become a genius. I was pissed off at myself for screwing up my wrestling career because I had great talent, but I screwed up. I kept coming back too soon after being injured, getting re-injured. So I recognized, gosh, I got a lot of academic ability. I could really become a genius someday. And, I wanted to do everything I could to make that come true. So I really was a total workaholic. I would wake up in the morning and work nonstop all day long because I felt so bad. I would cry when I was by myself about having screwed up my wrestling career. And I'm like, I don't want to screw up my academic career. I already messed up wrestling. I can't go back and do a redshirt year or change that. I could have talked to Shell sooner. All these things. And I can't fix that. But I'm not going to. If I fail, it'll be because I failed. I just didn't have the ability. But it won't be because I didn't try hard enough. So I would push myself as hard as I could push myself. I'd study till I was going to drop out of my chair. And I really wanted to learn. I wasn't just trying to get grades. Yeah, I wanted the grades, but I wanted to really learn. And that helped me. I would retain more. But also this idea of audacity, because people sometimes tell me, oh, don't be stuck up or don't be conceited. And what I'm trying to say is there's always, a bunch of people trying to smack you down. So unless you have the ability to say, no, I'm not going to let myself be smacked down. Or if you smack me down over here, I'm going to pop up over here. You kind of got to have this resilient attitude. It is my destiny to be a great genius, to achieve in this area. Because if you don't have that, you're most likely going to get smacked down. The world hates geniuses, okay? And I know what it's like. I was a great athlete and I was a great scholar. And I can tell you, when I was a great athlete, everybody liked me, okay? Even the other team would like you, okay? But when you become a great scholar, people hate you. Because they feel embarrassed by you. They feel embarrassed by you for being smarter than them. They feel pissed off at you for coming up with a better theory than their theory and having more prestige in them in that area. It's weird, but there's a few people who appreciate you. Yeah, you save somebody's life, they appreciate you. But those people are rare compared to and quiet, and they just say thank you and go on the way with the rest of their life, compared to the people who see you as competition or as a threat to the status quo or something. Believe me, you always got some asshole giving you a hard time if you're pushing genius level in a field, okay? All right, if I was born again, I would love to learn how to read Greek so I could read the ancient Greeks and I could read the New Testament. I'd love to learn how to read Hebrew so I could read the Old Testament, all that old stuff. I'd love to learn Latin to read Cicero, Julius Caesar, and some of the other ones. German to read, the great composers. I love learning about Mozart, Bach, Handel, Beethoven. And I used to date a Juilliard musician for a long time. So I was real into classical music and all the great musicians, composers, and all that stuff. I would love to be able to read all their biographies in their native languages, okay? Because, how they inspired themselves to become such genius. Because a lot of being a genius is really being a maniac. You have to have a monomaniac focus on whatever field it is. Because, again, you have to get better at that field than anyone else who ever lived. And it's not that easy to be better at something than anyone else who ever lived, than anyone else on the planet. So you have to be a maniac. And the question is, how do I convert myself into a maniac in that field? If you want to be great, that's what you have to do. I can tell you the stuff that, like, a wrestling coach would say, Mark Schultz, the only thing I care about in the world is becoming a world champion. And his entire life was focused on becoming a world champion. And I would see, he wouldn't even talk to anybody sometimes for a week or 2 weeks before a big tournament. And that may sound a little crazy, but man, it was almost like all this pent-up energy, like a battery that was just finally activated during the competition. And he would come out of the starting gate, so to speak, in the wrestling match and just have this unbelievable energy and power. I saw it. It was amazing. I'd like to also read the philosophers. Goethe, Schopenhauer are the two best. Warburg I'd like to read on his biochemistry. I like to read old Kempner in German, and Nietzsche a little bit. Nietzsche's overrated, okay? Nietzsche's funny, he's kind of clever, but he's a little bit of a sick-in-the-head homo nutcase, okay? He's overrated, but he is fun. Okay, Spanish, to read Cervantes and joke with my cousins better. I could speak and read Spanish, but not fluent from birth. So my cousins, Puerto Ricans speak so fast. It's hard to get all their nuance. And I don't see them as often as I like. I wish I had lived closer to them. Sugru, Romanticism was a reaction to the cold atheistic emptiness of the Enlightenment, like Protestantism. Goethe called back from Romanticism to Classicism. He one time said, Goethe, that everything of Classicism is healthy and everything of Romanticism is sick. A lot of craziness happened with Romanticism. When you think of Percy Bysshe Shelley, you think of Lord Byron, they're kind of nutcases, those guys. Okay, Enlightenment emphasizes dominance of nature and colonization of non-Western cultures. Yeah, it was sort of the idea that, the European man was superior to everybody else, so they should colonize Europe and India, they should colonize Africa and India and all this other stuff. And they wanted freedom for themselves, but not for their colonies. Sugru says Robinson Crusoe is the Enlightenment man who disobeys his father, like Adam and Eve disobeyed God. Okay, I'm talking a little Sugru here, the philosopher. We're going to get into Goethe more, but I'm just starting out with a little background on Sugru. You could watch this video about Goethe, but it's mostly about Sorrow as a Young Werther. You're going to find Faust more developed and interesting. Sugru loves Goethe's Faust. The Easter bells symbolize hope. I'm going to get into Goethe's quotes in just a minute. There's a little bit of backstory. Faust combines sort of everything. That's another thing I like about Goethe, this idea of he could combine metaphors, ideas, allusions to ancient Greek culture, Roman culture, his Christianity, German culture, the Bible, etc. So Goethe was able to just put everything all together. Okay, so Sugru says, Goethe indicates the path to salvation is inspired labor and art. Yeah, it's fun to create art, and literature and all that stuff. It's really a lot of fun. But, like Jordan Peterson had said, it's hard to monetize real creativity. You can monetize being a sellout scumbag, but it's not easy to monetize telling the truth or doing something creative. This is a Sugru quote. Romanticism is characterized by no sense of proportion. Yeah. Okay, so we want to get to the Goethe stuff. All right, so here is Goethe. Goethe was homeschooled, like most geniuses have been. He was also, like I said, a magnificent scientist. He was sort of the ultimate Renaissance man of the late 1700s, early 1800s. He was homeschooled until he was 16. So was Oscar Wilde and a lot of other geniuses. You learn a lot more being homeschooled if you got a half-intelligent parent than you do going to public schools. You don't learn anything in public schools. Okay, he was fluent in Greek and Latin. A lot of people were fluent in Greek and Latin, and that makes you way smarter. You read about the ancient Greeks. There's so many geniuses in ancient Greece. You can become jealous of them. You want to be like them. Archimedes, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Aeschylus, Euripides, Sophocles, Thucydides. Okay? It's very inspiring to learn about the ancient Greeks. Like Schopenhauer said, why were the ancient Greeks so much smarter than us? Okay, they're rather amazing. Okay, reading The Sorrow as a Young Werther by Goethe, where he writes the letters. Okay, I talked about that already. But I did have an observation. So Goethe was so in love, head over heels with Charlotte, always writing about her, talking about her, thinking about her, observing every little nuance of how she dressed and moved and spoke and behaved. And what I'm saying is, if you felt that way about biology, fell in love with it, you would learn it so well, you'd be an A+ student. And that, I think, is actually one of the secrets of becoming a great student. Like I said, when I learned biochemistry, I wanted to learn it so bad. I'm like, this is the language of God that he uses to write the book of life. If I'm ever going to become a great scientist or doctor, I must try to learn biochemistry as well as possible. And that really helped. Okay, so anyways, I think that's a secret of teaching a student. I've also had that experience when I tutor students sometimes, is I start talking to them about philosophy. And some of these students, they start giving me an attitude, like giving me, rolling their eyes, say, well, the kids who are the best student in my school, they don't do that. And I'm like, you don't understand. If you want to become a fantastic student, you have to get this worldview and value system in place that will enable you to have the energy, to work harder than other people, to care about the material enough that you're going to retain it better. Because most students, they take a test, they forget most of the stuff, take another test, forget most of the stuff. But if you got this overwhelming desire to become great in that field, you'll retain more of that material and keep building. You'll be better able to see the connections, to read things outside your required textbooks and also see the connections. It's all part of it. Okay, as Schopenhauer had said, the best books are primarily about interiority, the thoughts of the character and the thoughts of their interactions between the characters. What he meant was they're not about action. Look at the movies. The action movies are for, non-English speaking retards, okay? It's the personal struggles and challenges that make a movie magnificent. Like, look at It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart, one of the greatest movies of all time. His personal struggle, to support his family, to support his customers and all that. It's magnificent. It's beautiful. Okay, and there's been a lot of other great movies. If you watch, The Agony and the Ecstasy about Michelangelo, Amadeus about Mozart, etc. It's that what's going on in their minds that makes it fascinating. Okay, Goethe and Faust. I like the one line from Faust. I have doctorates in everything, but I don't know anything. It's just vocabulary. It's like a modern medical doctor. They just know how to sell drugs. They don't know anything about disease or health. Okay, Goethe on self-development. Okay, now these are the kind of things that I meant that he reminds me of Ralph Waldo Emerson, Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar, and I really like all these things. Okay, now first of all, he says, a great man's shortcomings are taken from his epoch. His virtues and achievements are his own. So that's an example, like let's say Thomas Jefferson. Well, yeah, Thomas Jefferson had some slaves. It was actually illegal to set your slaves free. So you shouldn't judge Thomas Jefferson on that because that's how it was in Virginia at the time that he lived here. Well, you can judge Thomas Jefferson on the fact that he was a magnificent genius. He was a contemporary of Goethe. And like Goethe, he could read in multiple different languages. Thomas Jefferson was, probably more religious than Goethe. He would read the Bible in 5 different languages, okay? But what he's basically saying is, don't hold something against a guy if he's doing what everyone else in his time was doing. There's a lot of things you have to do in your time that you don't want to do or you don't believe, okay? You can't get around them, okay? You can't do anything about that. So that's, like if somebody was going to criticize me, they'll say, well, why didn't you make videos about chemotherapy? And I'm like, because they would just get taken down, okay? Then I see that Dr. Greger makes one, and so far it's stayed up. But who knows how much longer that's going to be there. I wasn't aware that somebody could make that video on YouTube and not have it immediately taken down or even get, a problem for them. Okay, so that's a big statement there, though, because when you study geniuses, you're going to see every single genius you ever studied is going to have something about them that modern society would not like. Well, too bad. Okay, they were a product of their time. Okay, Goethe, wisdom is only found in truth. That's why it's so important for people to tell the truth. And that's why, the modern medical textbooks stink. That's why modern research literature, when it's funded by corporations, it stinks because they don't care about telling the truth. They got an ulterior motive. Goethe, first and last, what is demanded of genius is love of truth. Yeah, you have to pursue it. And when you pursue it, you're going to have to pay a price. And Will Durant had also said that. All geniuses pay a high price. Okay, and if I'd have to say what price did I pay, I paid the price that I would let my wife kind of run things because I didn't want to be bothered. I would let her run the house, the properties, all this stuff because I didn't want to be bothered with it. I wanted to focus on my studying, my books, my videos, whatever. So in the meantime, she's, I'm not even going to go into it, but trust me, that was not to my advantage from other points of view. But anyways, you're going to pay a price. You can't do everything. I would love to do more things. I would love to travel more to Puerto Rico and see my cousins. But, you need to have all the money. You need to have all the time. Most doctor jobs are full-time, and you don't have as much time as you want. I wish some rich person would sponsor me so I could just study, because I got 5 books written in my head. I just need the time to sit down and write them. I got a lot of other ideas, too. All kinds of great things I could do. I just don't have the time. So that's why I admire, Ben Franklin too. He got rich by 38 years of age and he could do whatever he wanted. So there's a lot of things you do differently, but you only get one chance at it. So that's why it's important to have good mentors and teachers and parents to teach you stuff, because you can learn a lot faster when somebody with experience just tells you what to do or what your options are, because it takes a while to figure them out. You figure things out in real life by trial and error, making mistakes. Okay, Goethe. He says, for a man to achieve all that is demanded of him, he must regard himself as greater than he is. Man is made by his belief. As he believes, so he is. Yeah, and I say a perfect example is myself. I said, I want to be the best doctor in the world. And I studied all the doctors on the internet. And I'm like, gosh, I could be the best doctor in the world. I knew it right away many years ago because I saw almost all the famous ones are selling out to just sell stuff and promote stuff, do commercials basically. And I said, if I stay honest and I work hard and I study, I can be the best one. I'm going to try for that because that'd be kind of fun to do. So anyways, and that would make me happy that I sort of helped fulfill my destiny. So anyways, it's, that was before I was really there. I had to review a lot of stuff that I had gotten rusty on. There was a lot of biochemistry stuff I had to review. There was a lot of nutrition stuff I had to learn. But I wanted to pay the price. I went through all the old Kempner and Burkitt and McDougall and Swank and many others. Okay, Goethe. All professional men are handicapped by not being allowed to ignore things which are useless. That's another thing I saw, is that I saw most medical textbooks, they all stink. Most art textbooks, they stink. Most quote books, they stink. And I'm like, how come all these books suck? And the reason they suck is they're usually written by college professors who feel obligated to include a comprehensive view of things, or what would be thought appropriate by the textbook curriculum. So for example, when a college professor writes an art book, they typically include caveman paintings, fat female fertility goddesses, all this crap that could have been done by a child. And they don't show hardly any masterpieces, and they hardly talk. I'm like, these books suck. I want to see the masterpieces. I want to see the great achievements of mankind. So I go, I'll make my own art book, and I'll just show the masterpieces, best Christian art. I made it, okay? And then same thing when I wrote my books. I'm like, well, what would I want in a book? I would want the truth. I would want jokes. I would want metaphors. I would want whatever is relevant to help me memorize and understand the material. So I would throw in paintings, quotes, whatever gestalted with myself, resonated with myself, that I felt would resonate with a reader, an intelligent person. I always write like I'm writing to an intelligent friend. And the result was I was very happy with how my books came out, and my doctor friends would tell me all kinds of things like Tail of Two Toes in a Hot Tub. They go, that's the funniest medical book ever written. Or my other books, they go, these are the best medical books ever written. They would say that to me, and I go, well, why don't you guys ever invite me to give a lecture in front of your group? They go, oh, no, we could never do that. I go, well, what do you mean you could never do that? They go, you have too many jokes. You're too vulgar at times. You show religious paintings that's completely verboten. Too many abbreviations. And you make fun of clinical medicine. Clinical medicine would lose money if people actually became low-fat vegans and got healthy and all this other stuff. The religious stuff, that's unacceptable in any type of school. And I'm like, okay, so you're basically telling me all the things that make the book great make the book also forbidden. Well, that's screwed up, and that's why you guys, your curriculum sucks, your textbooks suck, and you guys don't know anything. So anyways, that's it for this part one on Goethe. Hope it was helpful.